Thank you for joining us at the Evolution of Medicine Summit. A warm welcome. We wanted to make a specific thank you to our sponsors that have made this event possible. Energetics, an innovative natural remedy and supplement company, is committed to revitalizing medicine, and Cyrex Labs, a clinical immunology laboratory specializing in functional immunology and autoimmunity. Most of all, thank you for listening. If you'd like to share this with your colleagues and friends on Facebook if you enjoy the content, and if you have questions, you can ask us on Twitter with the hashtag EvoMed. Finally, if you really want to play your part in accelerating the evolution of medicine, ask your doctor if the Evolution of Medicine Summit might be right for them. Thank you and enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Evolution of Medicine Summit. This is James Maskell and I'm here today with Dr. Frank Lipman. We are here in New York and we're going to talk today about a number of areas with his practice, but particularly the innovative use of health coaches in his practice. Dr. Lipman, thanks so much for spending this time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Doc, you and I share some mutual history in that we grew up a little bit in South Africa. Can you just, for those people who aren't familiar with your story, what was it that sort of initially drove you to be a doctor? And then how did you end up practicing so far from home?
Well, I became a doctor because my brother was a doctor and I didn't know what else to do more than anything else. That's sort of what happened in South Africa. If you did well at school, you did medicine, and my brother did medicine, so I did medicine. But soon after I qualified as a doctor, I got exposed to non-traditional healers. When I was in the hospital at Baragwanath Hospital, which is in the middle of Soweto and happens to be the biggest hospital in South Africa, I had noticed that when we couldn't help the patients, the family used to call the Sangoma in, the traditional healer. And I noticed that sometimes these patients got better. And I thought to myself, this is interesting. Here we can't help these patients. And the Sangomas, which I always thought was quackery, I didn't believe any of it worked, but yet they were helping some of these patients. So something sort of went off at the back of my head that maybe someday I'll look into it. And then I went to work in the bush after my internship at Baragwanath, and I got exposed to Sangomas again, but this time I had more time to actually explore and see what they were doing.
Okay.
And the same thing came up again and again. The patients that we weren't helping seemed to be helped by the Sangomas. I didn't really understand what they're doing. They would throw bones, they'd use herbs. I mean, none of it made sense to me, but I did notice that they were helping patients. That was my first exposure to non-traditional medicine.
And under apartheid, that was not a system of medicine at all. That was a big no-no. It wasn't looked at favorably by medicine.
Yeah, that was a major no-no, not only during apartheid, but by Western medicine, by white people. That was a real black thing that happened that was, yes, an absolute no-no. So, but it intrigued me, and I was always interested in African culture. So this sort of just went with my interest in the culture. But I didn't really understand what they were doing at the time. It just sort of did pique my interest.
Okay. So, Doc, how did you end up in moving to America?
Well, my wife and I didn't want to live under apartheid, and we wanted to leave South Africa. As much as we loved South Africa, we didn't want to live under that system. So I passed my exams to come to America, and we came to America. But before we came, I was also working, after I worked in the bush for 18 months, I worked in a private practice in Johannesburg.
Okay.
In sort of a white upper middle class practice in Johannesburg. And what was happening, people were coming in and they were complaining of headaches and irritable bowel syndrome, and they were tired and they were stressed out. And I was working as a GP and I didn't know what to do with these people because I had no tools. The training that I had gotten at the hospital in Western medicine didn't actually prepare me to deal with these type of people.
Yeah.
And I went to the doctor, Paul Davis, who I was apprenticing for, and I said, Paul, what do I do? I mean, I didn't get trained to treat these type of problems. And he said to me something interesting. He said, Frank, don't worry. Your job is just to be there for them. You just support them while they get better, because people get better in spite of the medicines we give them. And in that practice, there was actually, because he used to see all the alternative people in Johannesburg, people used to come in and they'd seen the homeopath, and there was one acupuncturist in Johannesburg, and they'd seen the acupuncturist. And once again, I started noticing that the people that I couldn't help, the people who were coming with these problems that I couldn't help, they'd go to the homeopath or the acupuncturist, and they'd come in and they'd say, oh, I feel better. So all of this made me realize that my training was pretty limited.
Yeah.
So we immigrated to the United States, and in the United States I had to do a residency. There's a law in New York State, if you wanted to get a license, you had to do 3 years in a residency program.
Okay.
So I did 3 years in internal medicine, and after about 2 weeks after starting, I realized I didn't want to be a doctor in America because the medicine was very different.
Yeah.
In America, they looked at test results. That you didn't really have to take a good history or do an exam. You had to look at the X-ray, the EKG, all the blood results, then read up on about what the patient may have, and then present it the next day to the professor. You know, the relationship with the patient wasn't really important. In South Africa, we didn't have the money to spend on all these tests. You really had to spend time to sit down with people, take a good history, do a good exam, get to know the patient.
Yeah.
It was very different in America, and I was very disillusioned. I said to my wife, I don't want to be a doctor here. What am I going to do? And there happened to be an acupuncture clinic in the South Bronx attached to Lincoln Hospital where I was doing my residence.
Wow, that seems a bit unlikely.
Totally unlikely. And before I left South Africa, Paul, the doctor I worked for, gave me a gift as a going away present, and it was the Barefoot Doctor's Manual. And he gave it to me. He said, you should go study acupuncture. And at that time, it was a meaningless statement. But anyway, so I'd heard about this acupuncture clinic, and I decided to go check it out because I was disillusioned with Western medicine. And I walked into the clinic, and it was in this burnt-out building about 5 blocks from the hospital. And you walk into this clinic, and you see about 50 to 100 addicts sitting with needles in their ears, and they were sitting quietly. And it was quite an experience because these same type of patients were the ones I was dealing with in the hospitals, and they were pulling out their IVs, and they were shouting and swearing, and they were really difficult patients to deal with.
Yeah.
And here these addicts were sitting quietly with needles in their ears. So I said, I've got to check this out. So I went to speak to the guy who ran the clinic, and long story short, I started studying acupuncture while I was doing my residency. And that just opened up a whole avenue of a different way of thinking for me. So I was, some of the time I was going to the acupuncture clinic and learning about Chinese medicine, and the rest of the time I was doing my residency at the hospital.
Yeah.
And while I was doing both those medicines, I saw how the two could work together, because what Western medicine was good for, Chinese medicine wasn't particularly good for. And what Chinese medicine was good for, Western medicine wasn't good for. So I saw very clearly that the future of medicine would be the combination of the two. And then I met Jeff Bland, and Jeff Bland was articulating exactly what I was seeing, except he was doing it from a Western perspective. Functional medicine is in many ways Chinese medicine with Western language.
Okay.
So when I met Jeff Bland, and this was in the late 80s, and I heard him speak, I went, this is the answer. Because he put the concepts of creating balance and improving function from Chinese medicine together with Western physiology and anatomy and biochemistry. So he sort of put it all together for me, and that's where I've, been going since.
So Dr. Bland's been doing this for a long time. I think he started doing those lectures in like 68, and now it almost seems like just this year it's sort of like moving into a whole new sphere.
Yeah, I think he started, in the 80s, maybe, early 80s, maybe late. I'm not sure when he started. I mean, I came on in the earlier days, but he had been doing it for a while already, and that was 87, 88 when I met him, and he had been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
But he's just a brilliant guy, and he had just articulated exactly what I was experiencing, so it was perfect.
So your practice now is a combination of functional medicine and acupuncture?
Yeah, I do a lot of functional medicine. I do a lot of Chinese medicine. I use information that I've gleaned over the years from yoga, from acupuncture, from functional medicine, from Western medicine. So I use a bit of everything, from meditation.
That's great. So, there are a lot of doctors that I've met, who have a similar story. Typically, actually, their story involves more about something in their own health where they had to look for those answers and couldn't find them. But you're certainly sort of unique there. But the area that I'm particularly interested in speaking with you is just about this evolution of medicine, as far as like how medicine is actually delivered. And I think one of the things that you've done in the practice is to start to work with other professionals in a really profound and interesting way, because I think that obviously as we move from a type of medicine that's very much focused on the doctor saving the patient to the patient being sort of in charge of their own healing process, it does require a different set of skills for the doctor. And I'm not sure if modern medicine is teaching those skills, right?
No, modern medicine definitely is not teaching those skills. I don't think I think medicine in general doesn't teach those skills. And actually what happened to me was, I'd always worked with different practitioners. I'd worked with nutritionists and body workers and physical therapists. But the whole health coach thing was something really new to me. And what happened was, I've been doing detoxes for many years in my practice. I let Jeff Bland. And I'd say to a patient, okay, stop eating gluten, stop eating dairy. Here's a list of what you shouldn't eat.
Yeah.
Here are the supplements, buy, see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And it was fairly effective. In those days, I thought it was effective. And the people who did it, did it. The people who didn't do it, you thought, well, they're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And, I didn't have the time, and I don't think doctors generally have the time to sit down and go through the specifics and hold people's hands on the changes that they need to make.
Yeah.
And I first employed a health coach because I started a nutrition company online, and I thought I would need, the online company would need support.
Yeah.
And so I employed Kerry, who was my first health coach. So she used to work out of the office, and then I started just by chance letting her sit in with patients so she could get to know what I do, and then sitting down and speak to the patients afterwards. And it was, wasn't really intentional, but I noticed that when she spoke to patients, and she'd spent half an hour, an hour, really going through the specifics of what they should do, those patients did better. And then it was like so obvious to me that obviously people are going to get better or going to do better if you actually show them specifically what to do.
Yeah.
In the old days, I was, that hardcore approach. Here's a list, don't eat this, don't eat that. I've done it, you can do it, type of thing.
Yeah.
Which works for some people, but for most people, it doesn't work as well. And I noticed with Kerry supporting these patients, people were doing really well. My success rate just skyrocketed.
It's almost like with some patients, that list is just adding to a list of stuff that they're already not doing, and it's just making them feel even more guilty about the fact they're not giving up bread or dairy or whatever. Here's someone who can actually help them to find out, what are you doing now? How do you make it easy? The recipes. I know you're a big chef and you love cooking. And
well, I'm not a chef. My wife
Your
is.
wife is.
But yeah, I think what used to happen I think I was a little bit more militant in the old days, or saying, look, you can do it. Just stop eating gluten. It's not so difficult. It was partly probably because, I just didn't have the time and the knowledge, to be quite honest, to sit down and go through the specifics. So it was a real eye-opener to have a health coach who actually could support the patients. I mean, now we have 6. I always had 2 at any one time are in the office. And then we have, some rotating ones. But I find the health coaches incredibly helpful because, they actually hold people's hands. To me, they're the wellness nurses of medicine.
Okay.
And I think every practice should have a health coach, because if you really want to get people to make healthy changes, you need to support them through that process. And ultimately, what we do in wellness medicine, in functional medicine, is teach people healthy habits. And for people to really make those changes, they need that support and that guidance. And it's in a way a perfect match, because these guys love being here. They're seeing interesting people. They sit down with me during an intake. Yeah. So they have their own patients. The patients follow up with them. And so they get to see the progression of, let's say, someone comes in with an autoimmune problem or fatigue or whatever it is. They see how we treat them. So they're learning. The patients love it. I love it. They've taken a huge load off me. I just think it's a no-brainer. To me, this is the future of medicine.
Yeah. So do you have less time with the patients now, and then you put them with the health coach instead?
Yeah, not really. I still spend, we spend our intakes initially. We spend initially. I don't think I have less time. I just think the patient has more time with us.
Yeah. One of the things about functional medicine, it really honors listening to the patient and listening to their story. Obviously, that can be started in an hour, but it's an ongoing process. It's probably great for them to have someone to speak to about not just their health history, but what stopped them from getting to their best health right now and what's in the way of that, the social, the relationship, the food, the family.
Absolutely.
Could be all kinds of factors, right?
And how to make those changes. The common questions are, when I go to a restaurant, what do I eat? When I'm at work and there's only this available, what do I eat? Stupid things that I never even thought would be an issue, because maybe I personally didn't really experience it that way.
Yeah.
They are incredibly helpful with, tips on, often they teaching patients breathing techniques and meditation. They're giving them all sorts of resources. If someone wants paleo way of eating, here's some paleo resources. If someone's a vegetarian, here, this is the way you should be eating. This is where you can get the food. This is the type of coconut milk you should get because it's in a can that doesn't have BPA. I mean, little things that I never had the time or, as I said before, the knowledge to give people. They're giving people. So I think every doctor should have one. I mean, I'm just surprised that, it took me so long to get it and that most doctors don't have these people.
Yeah. But it's amazing. We've spoken throughout this summit to doctors who, sort of maybe have stumbled across interesting business models. We spoke with Dr. Saxena, who's doing group visits. She just suddenly realized speaking to a bunch of people at the same time with synergy, and it sounds like you've got some value from there. So I'm sure now that health coaches know that Dr. Frank Lipman employs health coaches, they all want to work for you here, right?
Yeah.
So what do you look for in a health coach when deciding when you're going to bring them on? Like, what's important to you about the skill set, the temperament, and so forth that you look like to make sure that it's going to be a good fit for your patients in your office?
Well, I think firstly it's a personality thing. I think that, just the type of patient and type, I like to see that they would probably get on with all the other health coaches.
Yeah.
Because you can really, if someone has a good basic understanding of nutrition and they're living that life, because all the health coaches live this life.
Yeah.
So they just actually espousing what they live. So they have to live the life, they have to practice what they preach, and they just have to have a warm way about them, a sort of an inviting energy, and be able to get on with 6 other women. But yeah, I think we get tons of resumes all the time. Kerry looks after that and Jennifer looks after that. But I think personality and living that life is important.
So for doctors who are listening to this thinking that sounds like a good idea, do you think it's a better fit for certain types of doctors like family practice or pediatrics as opposed to specialists, or do you think specialists could work well with it too?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends what the specialists are doing. I think what my health coaches do spend the time with the patients that I don't have in terms of the specifics. So if any doctor is telling someone to change their diet or learn relaxation, it will benefit them. So I think any specialty or any practitioner that is actually practicing in a way where we're changing their diet or we're getting them to learn relaxation techniques, a health coach can help, unless they want to do it themselves. But there's no question. I wasn't even aware of some of the things that these guys are teaching the patients. So first of all, I didn't have the time, and second of all, I don't have that knowledge either. So I think any doctor that wants to change their patients' habits, a health coach is worthwhile.
That's great. So you mentioned they're sort of like the nurses of the wellness revolution. Where do you see the parallels between what doctors traditionally get from nurses and what health coaches can get, functional medicine doctors can get from health coaches?
I think they're very similar, to be quite honest. I think, the nurses, even in a regular practice, are the ones often explaining to the patients the specifics, and because the doctor doesn't have the time. So that's why I say I see them actually in a very similar role to the nurses for a wellness practice. They're the ones that are actually really supporting people through their issues, which is basically what the nurses do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting parallel and a certain synergy. So, over time, how have you, obviously it was new at the beginning. Now that you've been doing this for a while, how do you maximize the synergy between your work and their work to make sure that most patients, as many as possible, get healthy as quickly as possible?
Well, now we have a whole system where people don't even have to see, people can choose to see their health coaches, alone without even having to see me. So if people just want nutrition advice and specifics that the health coaches can do, people can make an appointment to see the health coaches. I feel comfortable, all the health coaches that I've trained here, I feel comfortable enough that I think they could, help with these wellness evaluations. And, when they have problems, they come and ask me and I help them. So we have the wellness coaches seeing patients by themselves, and I'm sort of overseeing that. And every patient that comes in and sees me, we have a wellness coach that sits in with us.
Okay.
And then the wellness coach is supporting that patient through whatever changes they have to make. I don't think I could function anymore without my without my health coaches. They're an integral part of my practice now. I don't think I could practice without them.
That's so cool. So you have some patients that just come and see them, some that start with you and then go to them, some that just see you for a while and then maybe use them in between.
Exactly, yeah.
And it sort of depends on whether the issue that the person's coming in is something that is a function of their lifestyle that needs to change, or something that you need to intervene with, like more advanced labs or otherwise.
So I think we sort of have a system down now where we sort of know when, even the patients know when often they'll just come and sit down with the health coach and without me. So some people feel more comfortable if it comes from the doctor and they sit with the doctor first. But more and more people are starting to feel comfortable with knowing that the health coaches are good and they can help them. And if the health coaches need help, then they'll come and ask me.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you've trained some of these health coaches. I know you've been a big supporter of the Institute of Integrated Nutrition that are creating coaches. I know there's a wide range of organizations. There are, dietitian coaches and dietitians. There are even nurse coaches now.
So that's a really good point. I can only talk for the coaches that I have here.
Yeah.
But I do feel, as a doctor of functional medicine, you can train. I've trained my health coaches. They have a good basic understanding from IIN.
Yeah.
And after that, then I train them, they get trained in supplements and they get trained in functional medicine by just sitting in with the patients.
Yeah.
And, after, 6 months, a year, whatever they do sitting in, they get a good handle on it. So I can really just talk for the IIN nutritionists, although one of my nutritionists came from, I think she was trained in the Western Price tradition. Okay. But she's great. She's picked it up quickly too. So I think, it's obviously a personal thing, and I get to see how quickly they pick up stuff and how quickly I'm comfortable letting them see patients. But I think anyone with a good nutrition understanding, and not, so far I haven't been impressed with the dietitians. I think people who've been trained in, what I love about IIN is they train them in all the different food philosophies. They'll teach them about paleo diet, vegetarian diet, Mediterranean diet. They teach them all these different ways of eating, and I like that because there is no one right diet for people.
Yeah.
So we take it from there. I mean, the what we do a lot in the practice is we start with a cleanse. So they are all experts at supporting people through cleanses and then taking them. To me, the cleanse is a great entry point into healthy living.
Yeah.
So I always start with my cleanse. They guide them through the cleanse, and then they take them to the next level. Yeah. And then we go from there. So I think, as you mentioned, some of them just come see me with the health coach. Some of them just come see the health coach. Both of us going back and forth. It's wonderful. It's like a seamless back and forth with everyone. It really works well. I'm very, very happy with it.
So if you're putting this together and you can see another doctor wants to put this, what sort of time do you think it could be from thinking this is a good idea to having sort of a working model in the practice where they'd be able to get the benefits that you're talking about from having a coach?
Well, the coaches that I've had here, first of all, they first get trained for a month or so by my other coaches.
Okay.
Then they start sitting in with me with patients. So, well, they get trained about a month, but when the other coaches say that, okay, she's ready, she gets it.
Yeah.
And we teach them how about the cleanse and how to support people through the cleanse and everything else. And then they start, after a month or so, they start sitting down with patients and me, and then I get to see how they understand what's going on. And I would say it takes a good 3 months before you'll get comfortable with them. But after 3 months, they're ready to go, as a general rule.
So I'm thinking now from the health coach's perspective, they're listening to this and they're excited and they want to go and speak to the local doctors in their area to see if there might be an opportunity to work with them. What was sort of like, if you had to understand the pain point that you had, the thing that was really pain, is it just your time? Is that the biggest thing that it's come back to, or the patient satisfaction? What are the areas that they could convince doctors to do?
It's my time. It's patient satisfaction for sure. Patient compliance and good results.
Yeah.
And just made my life as a functional medicine doctor, where I know lifestyle changes are so crucial. It's made my life so much easier and more enjoyable, because patients are doing better without me having to spend tons and tons of time with them.
I mean, at the end of the day, when practitioners go towards a cash practice, they have to provide value. You have to provide value to the patient, and that seems like that's a great way to provide value outside of yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, good point, Yeah,
because that's another thing that we're talking about here. We have other doctors during this summit talking about their journey to a cash transition, using different types of technology, using group visits, using other things. So there's certainly a desire by people to leave, and it seems like if it comes back to value, if you're going to be charging cash, you need to add value. Finding different ways to do that is so crucial.
Right, good point. I think the health coaches add a lot of value to the practice,
That's great. So one other question, I know that you're very involved with, sort of how to scale yourself out. Obviously, health coaches can be sort of an extension of you in a certain way, but I know that you've written a number of books like Total Renewal and Revive, and you've also...
one coming out in January.
Okay, what's that one called?
The New Health Rules.
Okay, that sounds great. January 2015?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll watch out for that. I guess the question, and I also know that you do a lot of blogging and communicating out that way. What's been the impact since you've gone down the road of actually creating third-party educational tools for your patients, or engaging them with those? Has that made it easy to sort of like to sort of copy yourself out and save yourself time in a certain way? Just say, hey, just read this and then we'll talk?
To a certain extent. I mean, I've been writing for ages, and my health coaches, by the way, helped tremendously with all my social media, blogging, everything. I mean, the health coaches they do that as well in this practice. I don't know if they necessarily have to do that in another practice, but in my practice, they write blogs. They help me a lot with media stuff, and when we get press questions, they help me with my social media in general. So that's just another role they have, and which has been great. Does I suppose it does. I don't know. I just write. I have a blog, and I think it does help knowing that we have so much content that we send people to, whether it's a Pinterest page or the blog. So I think that does help to a certain extent, but it's a lot of work. I mean, I have spent a lot of time writing. I mean, I love it, so it's not a problem, but it's work.
It's interesting because it seems like this evolution of medicine that we're talking about here is almost a sort of a movement back to the old style of doctor. Like you said, the relationship with the patient, now writing, that almost goes back to doctor as teacher, which was the initial.
That's, to me, I relate to that model, doctor as teacher.
Yeah.
And I think the writing and the health coaches sort of fit into that model, because I'm really trying to teach my people, guide them into healthier ways of living. So that's sort of why I've always been intrigued and interested in the writing, because I do see myself as a teacher. I'm trying to, as an evangelist, trying to spread what I've learned and seen help to other people.
Yeah, that's great. So outside of the health coaches, I think you've done a great job in explaining that, and I hope that if there are doctors or healthcare providers or medical stakeholders listening, that they take heed of this, because we can't have the highest price providers providing all of this medicine to everyone in the population, because it's just not going to work like that. But it seems like with the innovative use of different types of practitioners alongside the main doctor, we can really start to scale this out for almost everyone in America. So, Doctor, outside of using health coaches, we're talking a lot on this summit about the evolution of medicine. Where are some other areas that when you look at medicine, you feel like medicine either needs to evolve or is going to evolve or should evolve?
Okay, one of the biggest gaps or weaknesses I see in Western medicine is their understanding of musculoskeletal issues.
Okay.
So in Western medicine, you have a pain, you go to the orthopedic surgeon, he takes an x-ray and your bones aren't broken, and they'll give you an anti-inflammatory or they'll send you to a PT. So the understanding of what I call soft tissue medicine, muscular medicine, the fascia, is a huge weakness of Western medicine. And luckily in this office, and mainly because I learned it from acupuncture, I have a woman who you probably should interview as well. I have a woman who does something called active release technique. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of it, yeah.
So that's soft tissue medicine. So I think the area of understanding soft tissue and fascia and the healing of that particular organ system, because it is a whole organ system, I think that's an area that Western medicine is really poor at, and we need to get much more sophisticated in that. And the second area, I think, is the whole gastrointestinal microbiome story.
Yeah. I know you've been quite passionate and writing about that consistently. Yeah. It's just starting to blow up. What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's the future of medicine. I think what goes on in the stomach or in the digestion or in the intestines it causes all sorts of problems. I mean, I'm sure people in this series have spoken about leaky gut and dysbiosis, and we can go on, but that's why I think my cleanse is so effective, because we're actually killing the bad guys in the gut. And I think treating the gut is often the key to all sorts of illnesses. So I think our understanding of the gut and how to treat the gut and its problems is an area, as we get more sophisticated, people are going to do well, and hopefully Western medicine will get it. I'm not sure they will. And then the whole musculoskeletal area, the whole soft tissue, muscle medicine, whatever you call it, those two areas are what I deal with all the time, and I think are two huge weak areas of Western medicine.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lipman. That's very insightful, and I'm excited to let you guys all know now that we have a couple of Dr. Lipman's health coaches here to talk about what it's like from the perspective of the health coach. So, Kerry, Jackie, welcome. It's great to have you guys here as well. So, Kerry, I know you were the original health coach for Dr. Lipman. When you first started to now, can you just share with us a little bit of that evolution on how you've sought to improve the sort of efficiency of working together?
Sure. Well, when I started, Dr. Lipman really understood right away the benefit of having a health coach in the practice. And so he was great about, from the beginning, he had me sit in with patients so that I could understand their history and what was going on with them. And then afterwards, I would sit down with the patient one-on-one, and we would go through any dietary changes that we wanted them to make to support their healing. Because a lot of what he does, he's using acupuncture and supplements, and diet is a huge part of what he's using to help people's healing. And I think that over time, how it's evolved is we've just gotten really good at tailoring our advice and the support that we give to the individual. So I think we've gotten more sophisticated in that way of really being able to read the person and see what kind of changes they're ready for. You know, some people are really suffering, and so they will do anything you say. You know, if you say take out wheat, dairy, sugar, soy, alcohol all at once today, they will happily go off and do that. And then with other people, you have to work a little bit more slowly. So I think we've just gotten really good at reading that and supporting people with wherever they are, but also pushing people, you know, because people are capable of more change than they realize. And with the right support and giving them tools and teaching them alternatives, If someone is having terrible sleep problems and they're drinking a lot of coffee, we're good at, first of all, explaining to them why the coffee is probably a problem, kind of convincing the person why they should really take a look at this habit and change it. But then we also have such a toolkit for helping them come up with alternatives to make the whole process as painless as possible. Yeah. And what Dr. Lipman always says is that before we started here as health coaches, he would just give people a printout. They would get a piece of paper. This is what you can eat. This is what you are not allowed to eat. And he would send them out the door. And the compliance was not really high at that point. So compliance has just gotten much, much better.
It's so interesting because that's obviously what a doctor would do because they're used to writing prescriptions, right? Here's your health prescription, but in certain ways it doesn't work because, it just almost adds to a list of things that they're not doing and they know they're not going to do it and you need some help. So you mentioned dietary stuff. Let's just stick with the dietary stuff for now. Okay. What is the range of support that you provide there? Obviously, like maybe some cooking tips, some like where to find certain foods, but is it also in sort of mindfulness to do with eating? Like what's the range of things that you provide there?
Yeah, a lot of what we're doing is helping people just figure out what they're going to eat. If we're changing up their diet, for example, if we're saying that they should try out a paleo diet and do grain-free diet for 2 or 3 weeks to see if that helps their symptoms clear up, they initially might feel kind of panicked. What am I going to eat? Yeah. So it's that, just looking at some simple recipes or some simple meals or asking where they work. And so then we can think about what restaurant they can go to that's close to their work, their office. So it's really just helping them figure out what they'll eat. Definitely a lot of recipe support. I think a big thing for me is when people walk out the door, I don't want them to feel deprived. I want them to know that they have a lot of choices.
Find yourself introducing them to new stuff that they don't know about already?
Yeah, all the time. Almond milk is a big one. We've converted a lot of people from cow's milk to almond milk. Yep. Chia seeds is a really big one. Just getting people to incorporate chia seeds because they help digestion so much. Things like that all the time. We're getting people to try some new things.
That's great.
Yeah.
So Jackie, as someone who's just sort of more recently come into the practice and seen it, how easy has it been to come into this practice with some of these systems sort of already worked out for you?
So I think it definitely makes it easier, right? Because they have this whole kind of, they're in sync together here and they have a system set up that's running really well. And I see how effective it is every day when I'm sitting with patients. And then when they follow up or when they come in for a follow-up, like we really get to see how effective by us sitting with them, how they have been able to comply or how they have reached out to us over the couple weeks when they had a question. So it really, the support that we provide for them, I think really shows in the effects that we see in them when they're coming back.
So how often do you hear from these from patients in between visits?
I think it really varies. Sometimes they might get in touch not at all, and sometimes they'll be in touch a couple times with little questions. It varies patient to patient. Because we do take quite a while, if they need it, to sit down with them and really understand their lifestyle and what will work for them. So if they're telling us there's 100% no way that I can cook because I'm going to be traveling, then we'll make it realistic for them. Like Carrie said, if we are recommending a restaurant or explaining to them how they can best order off of a restaurant menu, but making them feel like it's possible regardless of whatever limitations they feel like they have. Yeah.
That's really the journey towards patient-centered medicine, is really making it about the patient and seeing what the patient can do and can't do. So outside of just food issues, where are other areas where you provide sort of coaching? Where are other areas that you provide support for people to help with compliance and introducing this with their lifestyle?
Well, we teach breathing exercises, so that's something that we do quite often. Yeah. Even teach some basic meditation practices that people can start to experiment with. Yeah. And then we also do a little bit with yoga. Okay. So teaching a few yoga poses that may help with their specific whatever they're struggling with or whatever their condition is. If someone's having trouble sleeping, we might teach some restorative yoga poses that they can do to calm down the nervous system at night.
Yeah.
Or if someone has constipation, we might show them some twists and different yoga poses they can do. Any other?
I think even sometimes if it comes up mindfulness around eating, like eating kind of hygiene, do you eat on the go? Do you sit down and really chew and eat, slowly enjoy your meal? Are you on your phone? Are you watching TV? Because especially if you have digestive issues, this can be, something that can also be contributing to your upset.
That's great. I'm sure you guys have graduates of your schools that, work independently. What do you feel is the sort of the extra value that comes from being associated or working in a doctor's office as opposed to just being an independent health coach where people maybe have their own doctor but are seeing you as a sort of a third party and you're not really talking to the doctor? Where is the sort of the synergy as far as like working in a doctor's office, knowing the doctor and being part of the conversation?
Well, there's so many benefits because the doctor can do so many things that I can't do. Like he can read their blood work, he can write a prescription for them, and then also I can keep learning because I have a doctor right here that I can ask questions to throughout the day.
Yeah.
So as things come up, we keep learning more and more. It's really powerful to have that kind of mentorship. And people are pretty complicated. Most people don't just need to lose 5 pounds.
Yeah.
They're also on some prescription drugs and, they may have some like heart problems or high cholesterol. And so it's really nice to have the backup support from a doctor.
Do you get the feeling that most of your colleagues would like to have this sort of relationship? It's just not sort of as available as it should be?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, that's really what we're trying to do with this summit is make it obvious to doctors that this is saves them time, gets better results. They become really in the service industry and they need to be providing that high quality of service. So where do you see this going from here? I mean, how do you see this evolving in the practice? Are there other areas that you're interested in evolving with your knowledge? Like, have you thought about different ideas for taking the service even further and providing more value to the patient? Where do you see it going from here?
I think for me, one thing that's been so interesting to learn is a lot about the supplements, right? Because food is incredibly powerful and can do so much, but sometimes there needs to be deeper work that goes on. And one way that's achieved is through the use of supplements.
Yeah.
And so that's something that wasn't really taught in my training and something that's been really interesting to see develop. Yeah.
That's a great point. So let me ask you this: so you're a graduate coming straight out of school, and you'd like to be able to do this. How much of this learning process is being done in the practice compared to what you started out with?
Oh, we're constantly reading and learning and passing books along to each other.
Yeah.
So and it's something I admire a lot about Dr. Lipman is he's constantly reading and giving us new books. So I think you never stop learning in this field.
It sort of seems like almost like an old school apprenticeship in a certain way, in that you're learning on the job, you're passing down knowledge. That's sort of been lost in medicine to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Dr. Lipman earlier referred to wellness coaches as sort of the nurses of the wellness revolution. Do you sort of feel like a sort of a nurse in this new medical paradigm?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really important support role. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that like it's been proven, it helps with compliance, and that's the biggest issue, I think, around these things. It's very hard for people to make changes to what they've been eating. Maybe they've been eating it for 60 years. So knowing they have a whole team supporting them through that, and someone they can, if they need to call or they need to email and say, like, can I eat this? I just can't figure it out. I'm overwhelmed. Yeah. I think that was really, really important.
Yeah, it seems like certain people will drop off because they can't integrate it. Some people will drop off for different reasons, but we need to minimize the barriers to making these successful changes for people because there are a lot of head barriers or mental barriers or physical barriers to them, and that's sometimes easy to keep as an excuse, but even financial barriers. Tell me a little bit about some of the patients that have seen Dr. Lipman initially, come to work with you, and then just continue to see you because they see value from that. How do you feel about that, and how satisfying is that?
It's great. It's so nice to see people just doing well, and that's really rewarding for us. So when people come back, if it's 2 weeks later or a month later, a lot of times they visibly look quite different. They're kind of bouncing with energy. So that kind of thing can be really fun to see. And yeah, it depends on the person, but a lot of times they just know that they need someone kind of holding their hand and cheering them on and coaching them as they make changes.
That's great. So if you're a health coach listening to this and you want to try and sell yourself to a doctor, you're obviously sort of, Kerry, looking at the resumes and going through there. What are some of the ways that you feel? Because what I hope comes of this is that the health coaches that are listening go and tell the doctors, like, hey, listen to this. This is working. Listen to all the time you could say. Listen to the improvement in the patient experience. What would you recommend to health coaches as they go into their community and look for doctors that this might be a good fit for?
Well, I think you made a good point just now. The time that they can save a doctor is tremendous. So always thinking from the perspective of the doctor and saying, this is how I can support your practice. I think it's great that like Dr. Lipman, for example, doesn't have to sit with his patients and explain what gluten is, why they should avoid it, what foods it's in, and what they can eat instead. I just don't think that's the best use of his time. So when you're approaching a doctor and explaining that this is your skill set, this is your expertise, you can help people really implement these changes quickly and easily and in a way that's fun and pleasant. That's a big deal. That's a huge burden to take off of the doctor.
Yeah. I'm thinking about some questions that you could ask, like how many times a week do you find yourself saying this, or how much time do you spend doing that? Because we've seen that even doctors are starting to innovate with even the way they're doing. We've got another speaker on this summit talking about group visits and working with a health coach to provide education in a group, doing little assessments to the side so that it's still billable to insurance. I think really this is the way that functional medicine is going to make it out to the rest of the world and to the part of medicine now that probably can't afford it right now. But it seems like a good next step. Are there any other, from your experience here, are there other tips that you would give either doctors or health coaches as far as really making this work in the long term, making this a good sustainable solution?
I think, really being open-minded just as far as like how the relationship is going to start or how it's going to play out. Like I know when Kerry started here, there was one health coach and now there's a team of maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And Dr. Lipman's been flexible with that and it's worked out. So being open-minded because it is a new model and there is no right or wrong way to do it. But it's also about just keeping the patient in mind and that service in mind and keeping that at the forefront of kind of what motivates you to.
That's great. Has there been extra value since there's a team now? Do you get learn from each other?
So much. We learn from each other. Everyone has, for example, one of the coaches that works here is a mom that has 2 young toddlers. And so she just knows about what to feed your young kids in a way that's a little bit of a blind spot for me. So it's great to be able to pool resources. Another coach that works here is really passionate about the paleo diet. So she's kind of our go-to person for paleo questions. I eat a more vegetarian diet, so people turn to me for questions about that. So we definitely develop our own expertise and can support each other and learn so much from each other.
And is the health coach, the specific coach that's given to a certain patient, given to them based on that sort of expertise? Like if it's a mom, that, different ones come in at different times?
Yeah, definitely.
That's great.
Yeah, as much as we can.
So one thing I'd love to ask you is, what are some of the common pitfalls that health coaches fall in when they're trying to integrate with working with a doctor?
Well, I think that sometimes when they are preparing to approach a doctor, health coaches get a little lost in the details of feeling that they have to present this whole big plan of exactly how they'll be compensated for the work and what the financial structure will be. And when I talk to other health coaches that are interested in working with doctors, I try to emphasize that they should focus first on just building a relationship.
Okay.
And so just try and get your foot in the door, try and meet a doctor, explain the value that you can add, build the relationship, and then all of the, I kind of believe that all of the details about how many hours a week you'll work and exactly what you'll get paid and how all of that will sort itself out, you can kind of do that after. So just focus on building that relationship first.
Make yourself valuable to the doctor, and then you'll be paid in accordance with that value.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, thanks for sharing that, because what we're really trying to do is just knock down the barriers for coaches, doctors, other types of practitioners to work together synergistically, because that's definitely a big part. One other thing I would ask is, what's the best form of communication between you and the doctor? Do you have a way to get good information back and forth and to communicate back to the doctor about the issues that the patient's having? How does that work?
I think the way that works is a little bit is just in person when we're here at the office, and a little bit is over email. But just always respecting the doctor's time is, of course, a good idea. Try and keep things, take it upon yourself to communicate well, take initiative to try and troubleshoot problems when you can, but then always ask questions when you can.
And how do you guys enjoy being on sort of the forefront of the communication platform for Dr. Lipman? Because I know you do a lot of writing and those kind of things. It seems like, I was just speaking with Dr. Lipman about doctor as teacher. It seems like there's a lot of potential to scale that education using these digital tools as well. Is that fun for both of you guys?
Definitely.
Yeah, I love it.
It's so fun to see, even on the Facebook page or on the blog, to see people get really into it. So anyone that's following us there, to be really interactive or ask us questions and to be able to help them in that way.
That's great.
Yeah.
So where do you see, I've asked all of the speakers that we've had on the summit about, it's called the evolution of medicine. And, the evolution of medicine looks at the different types of diseases that we're dealing with, the movement towards individualized approaches, the movement towards patient-centered care, all of which you guys are doing here. And that's why I wanted to feature this, because I feel like it has a lot of value. Are there other areas where you feel like, when I say the words, the evolution of medicine, is there anything that sort of pops out to you as far as like how you feel like medicine should or could or will evolve in the next, let's say, 10 years?
Well, I think something really interesting is happening with the internet. So we're seeing a lot of young patients, like call it maybe a 25-year-old woman, that will come in with her mother. And she has basically used the internet and done her research and figured out what's going on. And she's been to 5 or 6 different doctors, and none of them have been able to help her. But she's kind of figured it out on her own. And then they find their way here because they still need that little bit of guidance. They still need someone to put a whole plan together. And that's where Dr. Lipman can come in and be really helpful. So it's just quite interesting how people are becoming really empowered to take care of their own health and to do their own research. And then the role of the doctor almost becomes like a guide, or almost someone to confirm that they're on the right track or help them just put together the missing pieces. So that's been really interesting, just the way the younger generation is taking control. Yeah. And they are realizing that they don't want to be on drugs for their whole life, like prescription drugs. Yeah. And they're realizing how powerful diet can be. Yeah. And they're really piecing it all together and coming to us for some extra support. So I love that. I think that's so exciting. I think that people are learning that they can get better on their own.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head with that. And the internet's not going away. Yeah. It's here to stay. Yeah. Information has been democratized. Mm-hmm. I think the work that functional medicine doctors are doing, even some of our distribution partners like Mind Body Green, to just get the information out there, people can read about it and then they can make their decision. And my passion is really helping people to think differently about the type of doctor that they want running their health. Mm-hmm. They want someone who understands from a cause perspective. Dr. Lipman, Jackie, Kerry, whether or not you've stumbled across it or consciously created it, I really feel like you're doing something exceptional for the evolution of medicine. I'd like to salute all of you guys in your work for doing that. Thank you for making time and being on here today. Thank you, Jackie, Kerry. Thanks, Dr. Lipman, so much for your time. And I hope that the ripple effects of this conversation continue to ripple outwards for years and decades to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.